My name is Andrew Gabriel. I'm the Vice President here at Langham Court Theatre. And on behalf of everyone at the theatre, I'd like to welcome you tonight to the 2024 Victoria Festival of Authors. Oh my goodness, this thing is loud. To get it all started, I'm going to introduce you to Kagan McFadden.
Thanks, Andrew. I'll keep the applause going. Keeping the applause going. There's so many of us. So hello, my name is Kagan McFadden, and on behalf of the Board of Directors for the Victoria Festival of Authors, I want to welcome you to The Edge Effect, Poetry of Transgression and Transformation, featuring Jodie Chan, Leanne Dunick, Zara Nakvi, and Jazz Papadopoulos. Victoria Festival of Authors and the Langham Court Theatre are located on the traditional ancestral territories of Lekwungen-speaking people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. We acknowledge the ancestors, hereditary leaders, and matriarchs, as well as the creators from these lands, and we give thanks for the privilege of living and working here. We remain committed to serving as learners and as listeners. We also want to thank our funders and sponsors, the Canada Council for the Arts, the BC Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, the CRD, the City of Victoria, the Victoria Foundation, Access Copyright, Langham Court Theatre, and Munro's Books. Thanks also to Mo's Home Collection and Poppy's Floor Art for providing our set decor. There will be a 15-minute intermission midway through this event. The concession will be open, but please note that no beverages are allowed back in the theatre. There are 2 gender-neutral washrooms and bathrooms across the hall, and closed captioning is provided closed captioning is provided and can be accessed through your phone or tablet. Please just ask one of the volunteers for the Wi-Fi password and URL link. At the end of the event, there will be books available for purchase and signing, courtesy of Munro's. There is also 2 raffle draws. So if you haven't seen Yvonne Blomer yet, she will sell you tickets. The first, winning a copy of each book featured this evening, and the second draw is winning a copy of each poetry collection featured in the festival totally. If you haven't already purchased a ticket, like I said, please see Yvonne. This panel is curated by Planet Earth Poetry. Planet Earth Poetry is a 29-year-old weekly reading series celebrating new work of literary poets from across Canada every Friday night from September through June, and hosts the longest-running open mic in our city. So please welcome Kieran Regier, an award-winning poet and the 5th Artistic Director of Planet Earth Poetry.
Hello, everybody. So happy to see you all. Thank you for coming out in the rain. I'm here to introduce Melanie Siebert, who is the moderator and the person who conceived this panel. And I chose poets. I'm really excited to hear these poets read and to hear them talk and be guided by Melanie. Melanie is the author of 2 poetry collections. Her new collection is Signal Infinities, which is an amazing long poem. It's an incredible book. Please check it out in the book table. And she also wrote Deepwater V, which was a finalist for the Governor General's Award. And her non-fiction book, Heads Up, Changing Minds on Mental Health, won the Lane Anderson Award for Best Science Writing for Young Readers in Canada, and was also, if I remember correctly, shortlisted for a finalist for the Victoria Butler Book Prize. So Melanie is an amazing poet and an amazing speaker, incredible mind. Please welcome her, Melanie Siebert.
Thank you, Kieran. Hello, everyone. So nice to see everybody tonight. Kieran is the one who put so much thought and care into this panel and selecting this incredible array of writers that you're going to hear from tonight. I'm really excited that you came out, and just want to also echo my gratitude for being on Lekwungen lands and offer my honor and respect for the land and for the Songhees and Esquimalt Nation, whose laws and ceremonies and stories and songs come from this land, and also the Wasanich nations, who are our neighbors and have stewarded the waters and the lands since time immemorial. Tonight we have an incredible lineup: Edge Effect, the poetry of transgression and transformation. It's often at the edges, whether that be the edges of an electrical field, or an ecological community, or a culture, or even our own personal edges. It's the edges where there's difference meeting difference, there's flux, there's dynamism, it can be disturbed, it can be enlivening. This night of poetry explores that electric potential of the off-limits, the outskirts, the borderlands. Jody Chan, Leanne Dunick, Zara Nakvi, and Jazz Papadopoulos are rising star voices who show how poetry can expand our awareness, our possibility, and like Malia highlighted last night, how we ask and hold questions. Tonight we're going to begin with a reading from each author before our intermission. So let's get on with that. Jody Chan is writer, drummer, and organizer based in Toronto. They are the author of a number of books and chapbooks that are all emotionally charged and politically astute as they document oppressive forces and a dream of an insurgent, beautiful future. Jody's 2021 poetry collection, Sick, was a finalist for a Lambda Literary Award and was the winner of the St. Lawrence Book Award and the Trillium Book Award. Their most recent book, Impact Statement, borrows and disrupts the form of patient records, psychiatric assessments, and court documents as it traces a history of psychiatric institutions within a settler colonial state. As Cecily Nicholson says, this dazzling book, thriven in the aftermath of organized abandonment, blooms revolution and possibility. Let's welcome Jody Chan.
Yeah, thank you all for being here, and yeah, thank you, Melanie, for such a beautiful introduction. Yeah, it feels very special to be read and welcomed in that way. Yeah, and to everyone else, I'm so excited to hear you read and to be in conversation too. Yeah, and organizers and like staff of this theater, of course. Ooh, I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna read, I think, probably 3 poems tonight. The first one is the first poem in the collection, an impact statement. And with my editor, when we were working through my book and kind of in process together, we were talking a lot about the idea of like content notes and kind of their limitations, but also what they can be used for, because the book deals a lot with a lot of different kinds of violences and systems of organized abandonment. And state neglect. And so it felt important to kind of address that and let people know what they were entering into, but at the same time to not offer like an escape door or an escape hatch to look away from that. So I really, this is a content note and it's also a dedication, kind of holds that space in the book. And tonight I'm thinking about the martyrs of Palestine and Lebanon and the families being bombed in Jabalia, and the martyrs in whose name and by whose labor we'll see a free Palestine in our lifetimes. So, content note. If you ever faced coercion or confinement instead of care, if ever defined and diminished by the state, if reading about violence, medical, carceral, psychiatric, administrative, eugenic, intimate, institutional, systemic, evokes shame, grief, rage, regret, please take care, space, risk, whatever you need, I mean it. If you ever forged home, pleasure, hope for a future, from the ruins of textbook, ledger, occupation, from an archive in which you would not find your name, I'm reaching for you. The next poem is called Money Model of Madness, and I think this will be in conversation with some of your work as well, Melanie. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But thinking about madness and the framework and the diagnosis and pathologization of ways of being that are not normative or seen as being normal, and how that can also be a path to living in the world or embodying a revolutionary way of being, and how that's used to like suppress different kinds of resistance. But I'll shut up and read the poem. It's called Money Model of Madness. Care is not care until it is counted. Each filled bed, each head's turgid lake spilled over the lip of a therapy hour. The renamed asylum hosts vaccine clinics, flower stands, jewelry-making classes. Over screens, a matrix of hands, stringing beads onto stiff necklaces. Single-file lines suggest an intertwining structure, the accumulation of gestures, sure. Former patients polish the iron fences, closing themselves in. You understand, don't you? The administrator calculates the relative cost of warehouse and cure. The administrator exists to maximize return on investment, to shave down the distance between worker and surplus, between revenue and body, not to surrender a patient discharge form, nor a formal apology. It takes your life to excise the barred windows from your vocabulary, each hallway lit like a microwave, sensation of snowfall in the throat. Confinement takes place on a public-private continuum. All mothers take place on the other side of a locked door. POV, you're at the brain doctor's office again, confronted with the feelings wheel. Please select between disgust, déjà vu, arousal, apathy. The administrator's kink is productivity. Crushed velvet pillowcases, cardamom plum in little jars, wrists bound to bed with lilac ribbons. Lobotomies tested on taxpayers in the lowest bracket. Across the live edge of a neighboring alleyway, a mural cries, "You've changed." And the third and last poem I'll read tonight is called A Note on Absence. And so this book kind of delves into the histories of madness and institutionalization, and also psychiatric survivor resistance in Toronto. And geographically, just as a site, a lot of it centers around CAMH on Queen West, and we're in the neighborhood called Parkdale. And as I was doing research into those archives and finding that there was a lot of erasure, of course, and sort of difficulty finding stories of people who I know were most impacted or targeted by this sort of criminalization, racialized people, disabled people, poor people, but who weren't kind of in these official colonial archives. And so one of the edges, which we'll also talk about later, of this book was figuring out how to write into that, sort of honoring that absence also as its own way of survival and opacity, but also kind of acknowledging and honoring what was there. So this is called A Note on Absence. Where do we reside in the archive, you ask? The ledger's memory is incomplete. Mask of white noise, of dry administrative speech, page after page, while traces of us congeal in the corners. Say queer, say femme, say brown, black, poor, or one who knows home as a permanent ache. One who desires in all the wrong ways, long wire soaked in salt, scraping the dead skin from another woman's back. Bed-bound, bitten down fingers we twist and curl to remind each other we exist. Survival is a ritual named today, a gaze holding history. Secrecy, our place of fugitive comfort. We, the chorus, our paths interrupted, ghosts lawless, what's left? Privacy, the semblance of a door that locks from the inside out. The bedroom, the laboratory, the kitchen, the cage, the headline, the alleyway, the closet, the stage. Do you need our names to know we were there, living? Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Leanne Dunick is a musician, photographer, and writer who transgresses genres to produce provocative transmedia projects, such as a novel in micro chapters or a short story with a companion album. Leanne's most recent book, Wet, is a verse novel with photographs. In it, we meet a Chinese-American model working in Singapore who thirsts for the unattainable, labor rights, the extinguishing of forest fires, breathable air, healthy habitats for animals, and human connection. Stacy Alamo describes Wet as elegantly disconcerting and says, these poems travel with their speaker as she navigates the friction between female desire and commodification, between human eroticism and elemental forces. Welcome, Leanne Dunick.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm just going to get right into it. When I worked in Shanghai last year, the model I shared bunk beds with screamed into her pillow every night. Now, an extra $400 is deducted from my earnings each month so I can sleep alone. Luxury living. An air conditioning unit hangs over my single mattress. I brush a dead moth from my pillowcase, smearing its shimmering essence on cotton. Above, water rushes through pipes, an echo from the stairwell, someone clipping their nails. In Shanghai, the apartments were so cold that I slept in my winter boots and coat with my hat and scarf draped over my face. I awoke to cockroaches scuttling along the kitchen counter. Here, I wake up with a sweaty sheen and ants in the kitchen. The view, a cotton battened sky. Visibility, 2 blocks. Below, a gouged-out urban hole. A metal dragon lowers a slat, then another, in a slow game of Tetris. Migrant workers wear canary-colored hard hats and boots, towels around necks, torn fabric for masks. I share this flat with a 15-year-old model from Poland and one from Russia who is 24 like me. A domestic helper from China sleeps on a futon behind the living room bookcase. None of us talk much. I asked the Russian girl why we had a maid, and her response was, the last one ran away, even though the maid's agency had her passport. Fluorescent orange netting sections off walkways around the condo construction site, the kind found on oceanic garbage islands strangling seabirds and turtles. I pass 3 construction workers washing their hands in a bucket of gray water. Make eye contact with one, I look away. Look back, he does not smile, eyes fixed on me. Small puddles form on the ground as the men clean themselves. Pigeons drink the water. My cousin told me about Mao's campaign during the Great Leap Forward to kill the 4 pests: flies, rats, mosquitoes, sparrows. The people banged pots incessantly to prevent sparrows from resting. Soft stones dropped from the sky. What other animals fell? 45 million people, my ancestors. In this block, poisoned food is left for pigeons, for cats, for dogs, the hungry. As she kneads my foot, my masseuse asks me where I'm from. I return the question. Her, Sabah, Malaysia. She speaks English, Tagalog, Bahasa, Melayu. I'm surprised by her strength. She's 20. I'm only 4 years older, but weak and basically monolingual. Want 15 minutes body? $10 only. She guides me to a bed, clothes on, face down. She hoists her whole self on top of me, presses her rigid fingers along my body, thrusting them just outside my hollow. Her fingers ream me through the stiff denim of my jeans until she claps on my back and says, "Okay." And now I am helpless with want. Models must stay hydrated, eat non-greasy food, no chocolate, exercise regularly. The agency impresses the importance of staying fair. Use whitening cream with an umbrella when walking under the sun. I don't always abide by these rules. On the way to an audition, a faint voice behind me says, "Miss?" I turn around. A man stands timidly a few feet away from me. He points to himself. "Me, Tamil, India person, no work." I know I only have $10 and that I need it for my lunch today. Surely he needs it too. I hand him a $2 bill, hoping I'll get this job, and that next time I can give him more. A rat runs across the sidewalk, then back again. He looks in my direction and runs towards me. I casually step to the side as the rat continues into the bushes. This is how I make friends. Women pull at my inner thighs to fit me into their shapewear. They talk around me. Do they think I don't understand because of my American accent? Once absorbed into the nude-colored, body-shaping undergarment, I walk the show with other size 0 models, my shoes too small, but I smile and sashay in this unsightly underwear like I'm fucking Cinderella, or like I need the $500. Train station at dusk, hundreds of birds in trees. This urban space, their migratory path, a mania. No rain, but thousands of liters of high-pressured water clean these roads each night. If this equatorial summer is over, why do fires continue? This time, my masseuse looks to be my popo's age. She takes me to the bed and pulls a curtain around us. Clothes off. She doesn't leave. I strip down to my underwear. Those too. I hesitate. We all girls. I do what I'm told. I have the respect your elders gene. Nature is failing. She burns and burns, forgetting what it feels like to be wet. And me, weathering, a salted cup, waiting for damp. Nearby forests and oxygen scorch, not a skyborne drop, yet water pours from faucets. The helper cleans the bathroom twice a day. I only shower when I have to. Cats wail in the alley. Should I leave a dish of water out for animals, or will that only breed mosquitoes? Who gets to survive? Fires consume bodies. We wear white masks to filter toxic breaths. Dear pigeon, your body is a rain-filled cloud. 2 strips of night band each wing. The aurora of your neck must magnetize you to earth. Why are you so anxious? You've made maps, but the city changes. You're famished, but the bread you've eaten crumbles your bones. The agency texts us to say auditions are suspended until the haze lifts. It's too dangerous to be outdoors, that's obvious. My hair smells like smoke every time I go outside. But this doesn't help my make money fast scheme, which hasn't been going as well as I had hoped. Maybe my Asian face isn't fresh enough here. Maybe I'm too old for this. I wash my face of toxins with foam cleanser, apply toner, then cream that repels free radicals. Pop placenta pills. The skin around my eyes is sheer, clay in color, thin cracks beneath. It's nearly 11 p.m. and men still work below. Fall asleep to a gentle buzz and pop. Small insect bodies against glass. Today, the Polish girl is leaving. She's going to work in Italy. I wonder what her so-called boyfriend thinks about that. I hope she gets the new beginning she surely wants. A girl from Brazil will take over her bunk in a few days. The haze only slows the machine. A flutter in my lungs, each inhaled hazed breath, dust and blood in my handkerchief. The city has sold out of masks. Outside, the sound of metal smashing metal. Heat index in the low 40s. Workers wear long sleeves and cloths to protect their necks, their faces black with dust and sun. Everyone else preserved indoors. 2 months of this acrid haze, I order KN95 masks from Taiwan. How many to buy? 100 silver packages in a cardboard box. Masks with a flexible metal edge to form against nose and cheekbone. My tote full, I walk downstairs to the site, the perimeter squared in by metal barriers. Above the awning, sheets with sound barrier printed on them, a provisional enclosure. I don't know how to be noticed, so I place the masks in a pile by the orange netting. From my window, I wave good morning to the construction site. A masked worker holds a hand to his forehead. I pause, spread fingers on glass. The distance between, the width of the street, as close as we'll get. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Zara Nakvi is a Karachi-born writer raised on unceded Coast Salish territories in Vancouver, BC. She holds 2 Masters of Science degrees from Oxford University, where she studied as a Rhodes Scholar. In 2021, she won the Bronwyn Wallace Award for Emerging Writer. Zara's debut poetry collection, The Knot of My Tongue, is an urgent and eloquent book. It is the storying of language itself in the aftermath of devastating rupture. This book features a cast of characters from personal memory, family history, and Quranic traditions, at instances where they have either been rendered silent or found ways to attempt the inexpressible. Sophia Ahilo calls this book a lush tapestry, a tender and rigorous interrogation, tightly knotted in the long history of women, beginning here to unknot. Please welcome Zara Nakvi.
Thank you for that introduction, Melanie, and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. At the beginning, not a fall, not clay, a deluge. Walls, beams, all lines and angles collapse. What was vertical drifts horizontal. What was hidden breaks the surface. Things organize themselves anew, a dream spilling over, all things afloat. What was it the poet said? Turning and turning, the center cannot hold. Let me begin again. A girl in a windowless room, fist-size holes in the walls, broken furniture, a closed door, the silence before the flood, the pressure low and waiting, the world a vacuum. All memory is water. When you touch it, it ripples. When you try to hold it, the words fall apart. Let me begin again. A time of floods. All things wash ashore. Polythene bags and dying whales, slave ships and nuclear warheads, anthrax spores and mammoth bones, forgotten names and forgotten bodies reveal themselves anew. The earth regurgitates, gives witness to all things birthed and buried, the old myths, the sleepless ancestors. What stood only stood on the crest of a wave. All things collapse and fall, rock back and forth like a pendulum, the boughs of the trees in the breeze sinking and rising, the mountains never still. When you touch the world, it ripples. When you drop something, it comes floating back. When you tell a story, it echoes against itself, listening. A flood behind a closed door. A girl with her hand at the door. This next poem is called Lisan al-Hal, the language which things themselves speak. Unsung tongues, I am unbecome, done undone. Cipher your decipher, no lung in my tongue. To gone is found in tongue. If you say something enough times, it loses its meaning. If you don't practice, you forget. I forgot all the names, and now I am a world made of things. The thing sits inside, the opposite of the thing. The opposite of uncoil is coil, a pencil carrying its own eraser. My mouth holds silence. My mouth holds an underwater language. Hunger is gun-her. You are a carrier of sound. You are you curled inside. You is a sound that comes after tea. I dream of women around cups of chai. Something is only confusing if you try to make sense of it. Sue is an anagram of use, because if it's of no use, you can sue. Keep wagging your tongue till it becomes of use. What if I was told the story's all wrong? A mirror of deflections, a poet in a prophet, but no prophet in poetry. The call of a prophet is to remember. When I have the member, I will remember. Stitch water into language. Give birth to myself. The tasbih is for repetition. If you say something enough times, it becomes a part of you. Glory, glory, glory. I say the words until I'm chewing them, gnawing my maw, a dawning yawn. Silence is a room after closed doors. The opposite of silence is a room with the walls gone. What if all the words I was given are wrong? What if they never take me where I want to go? There are many places I want to go. What if I'm not swimming but floating? What if I'm not floating but sinking? The world above is all garbled light. Beneath the skin of the sea, I am sound, in sound alone. I'm going to lower this a little bit. This next poem is part of an untitled prose section, and I want to dedicate it to the poets of exile. And in particular, I quote Palestinian and a Kashmiri poet in this poem, so I'm thinking about them as I read this. A young man walks the streets of his childhood through signs declaring no dogs or Indians allowed. A woman turns one last time from a crowded, desperate train. Millions stumble into new old countries, lines on a map tearing across centuries. A man and a woman in a refugee camp put down suitcases full of loss, look up before they fall asleep to see the same old moon slipping across. A young father sits alone in a parking lot in the middle of a Canadian winter for an overnight security job. Wonders if this is what generations of leaving has come to. This parking lot, this unforgiving asphalt, these street lamps swallowing the soundless, sleepless night. The poet Darwish asks, where should we go after the last frontiers? Where should the birds fly after the last sky? Shahid writes, there is a sky beyond the sky for me. In the parking lot, the young father looks up, lips remembering lines. Tu शाहीन है परवाज़ है काम तेरा तेरे सामने आसमां और भी हैं सितारों से आगे जहां और भी हैं अभी इश्क की इम्तिहान और भी हैं. You are the falcon, to fly is your calling. There are more skies to come. There are realms beyond even the stars, further heights for you to ascend. In her room, the girl has taken to lying on the floor, ear against the ground. Maybe it is not the sky, Shahid. Maybe there is more earth beyond this earth for me. This poem is called Nuh. It's similar to, I guess, the story of Noah's Ark. It's based on that, and it's a kind of a twist on that story. Nuh. When the floods came, I stood at the shore, eyes wide, to the falling rain, watched the world bleed beyond its lines, the soil erode with silent surrender, The floating mangroves groan and bow, and all things kneel to the water. And I, a girl, stood wooden and true, drew myself in solidly, the memory of an ancient banyan, muscled flanks of wild horses, the bellies of great whales. I knew it was time to build what could carry, to find the high point, to name what I knew to be the world, and carry it with me. And this last poem is called Becoming. You know the earth in winter, the dry root. You know what it is to shrivel, to fall, and yet look how these trees persist. Look how you become a tree, how you gather the words left behind, assemble them from the scatter, plant them under your tongue to stay. From where the frost has taken root, how you melt into spring. Let philosophies long dormant emerge, take root and grow, brave and expansive. You gather and open and pour, fresh layer of tree bark, renewed limbs, petaled and tender. You find yourself at the swell, a place of mutable edges, rivers flooding, boundaries collapsing. Look how you earth, another kind of stillness, another kind of spring, not broken, but becoming. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Jazz Papadopoulos is an interdisciplinary writer, educator, and video artist. They hold an MFA from the University of British Columbia and are a Lambda Literary Fellow. Originally from Treaty 1 territory, Jazz currently resides on unceded Syilx lands in the Okanagan. Jazz's debut poetry collection, I Feel That Way Too, is an experiment in narrative poetics and a critical response to the Me Too movement. These poems are smart and daring, but also lyrical, moving to make sense of the body's nervous system in battle and recovery. Kai-Ching Tom calls this book heartful, haunting, and relentlessly honest, and calls Jazz a poet fiercely committed to the artistic vision and social impact of their craft. Please welcome Jazz Papadopoulos.
Oh my God, my heart's pounding so hard from this reading. I'm like up to here with almost crying. Birthday invitation reads, "No Barbies, please." Means Barbie will hurt my daughter's life with her long neck and neck-sized waist. Really means, daughter, I don't know how to explain to you my fad dieting, my food restriction, my exercise regime. I don't know how to explain to you the things that men and boys will say, shout, whistle. These complexities of dominance and subjugation stifle me. I fear my place in the world and now your own, that of your small body that is really my own small body that I cannot control. So instead, when you hold her, inevitably, against all my attempts and insertions, when you hold your first Barbie, our enemy, let us do this ritual. We will build her a soul with all the words we fear to hear. Your body is wrong. Your intentions irrelevant. Your aspirations offensive. Take her iconic body. Make it an emblem of our grief and fear. Emblem from the Greek embalin, to throw, insert. Put all that inside her and throw her away. Trace this all back to the Trojan PR campaign that somehow made it Helen's fault, responsible for 10 years of men's deaths after her capture, after her endurance, in her own bed each night, watching murder TV each day, with her weaving her needle point, stab, 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 until all the men hated her. The chorus swells, her fault, her fault, her fault. Joan of Arc, her fault. Barbie, her fault. Complainants 1, 2, and 3, her fault, her fault, her fault. This book was written in the wake of the John Ghomeshi trial. And just, you know, it was before the Me Too movement. It was kind of in my life anyways, the first moment of having this kind of public trial. That's all I'm going to say about it. Evening radio released Mr. from guilt. The sea suffered, source said. Each news headline, public story, testimony, flows within trenches already dug. You said he did what? Don't we already know what we think of this? After life is different, you are different. You change yourself, and you begin with the common parts: legs, underarms, isthmus between eyebrows. Used to be very hungry caterpillar, now just anorexic. Your great aunt's mustache terrifies you. Your mother teaches you to peel apples before eating them. You don't understand why, but the habit sticks. You peel everything, crave bare flesh, pluck fuzz before pressing peach to perimeter of mouth. The hunger grows, grazing knee pits, toe knuckles, nape from which mothers hang kittens like cloaks. You go hunting every night in your bedroom mirrors. Catch your face, the birthmarks jumping, buzzing, impishly rubbing their little front legs in front of your eyes, burning from all the wide-eyed incandescent nights. Without a doubt, this is your true self. Finally, all your fingers are bleeding. I didn't know we had this line in common. Dear pigeons. Dear pigeons, do you think I don't notice all the signs? Lipstick, blush, the cherry of your cigarette, red, like stop the pipelines, stop hammer time, stop Harper, Trudeau, the government. What burns, what falls, what blabs? What stains, what bruises? What did the newspaper say about all those women trapped between the street and the splash? There is a bedroom, there is a bed. There is rest for the wicked and a black hole for me. Too many windows, too many frames, and 1,000 of you lining the street. You coo, you calm, you reach, to ash your cigarette, to suit up your smile, to step off the roof, to float, to flee. What gravity, what history, what power, what me? Do you ever feel like violence and desire are so closely intertwined you don't know what you want? The memory of an experience produces the same, real, but not true. When I open to you with a wordless nothing, all I hope you'll say back is, I feel that way too. Lie on your back in a balanced and relaxed potential. Close your eye opener, if that feels comfortable, and focus your attention on your body image. Feel your audience on your face ache and the separateness of your failure. Observe the sensibilities in your babble as you breathe and the beating sensitivities such as the spelling of your heart reality. Now move your fool down your babble, past your cavities and brides and bellies, down to your pelvic abeyance. Rest your audience gently here, on your volta and vamp. Notice each sentience in this area as it emerges, lingers, and fades. Spend a few mists observing in this well. Can you detect sentinels in the clingstone and the hair-covered area above the clingstone? Can you move your audience downward to your outer livings? What about the inner livings? As you pay autoeroticism to these self-helpings, notice if you experience them as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Do you like the sentimentalities and want to keep your atoms focused on them? Or do you dislike them and want to push them away? If you realize you have forgotten about noticing your genius because you've focused on the contradiction of a thumb or a street, simply notice where your attraction has gone and gently return it to your sentience. Allow your attraction to rest on whatever sacrament is more prominent, mood to mood. When you are ready, open your fantasies. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. Thank all of you for such a beautiful reading. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to take a short intermission. Please mingle with the lovely writing community we have here. There's books at the book table. All of these books are featured there. And of course, we have the bar. And we'll see you back in 15 minutes for some conversation. Hello. Oh, okay. Hello, welcome back. I hope you brought out all the books. Yes, that's great. Okay, well, I just loved having your work all in conversation, bouncing off of each other like that tonight. We're gonna have a conversation for about 30 minutes or so and just chat a little bit about the books. So to start out, before we kind of get into how your work was speaking to each other, I was just curious about when you were in the process of writing, in your own little secluded whatever, wherever you write, your own mind and imagination, who were you thinking of in terms of who were you writing to or for? And you all have mics there, so just pick them up. Actually, maybe, Zara, I was thinking of that first poem in your book where you say, each sound has an ear at the end of it. Do you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah. I actually did have a very specific audience or in mind when I was writing the poems, not necessarily because that was who the book was for, but just to allow myself to write. And because I needed to feel safe on the page. I needed to feel honest. I also felt because a lot of the themes I was working with had to do with being both a Muslim and a woman, and working with themes around both colonial violence and patriarchal violence, and being at the intersection of it, and at the same time not wanting my work. I needed to feel that there wasn't a white gaze sort of looking at me while I wrote. So I was at the time, just before writing this book, I was living with some really amazing friends, four sort of other Muslim women that I was living with, and we would have all of these really incredible conversations. And so when I started writing some of these poems, it felt like a continuation of our conversations, and it felt they were just like talking to them and feeling like it's safe and intimate and personal, and that was sort of the only way I could write. Otherwise, if I felt like I was trying to say something bigger to the bigger world, I wouldn't be able to share what I needed to say. Yeah.
That's beautiful, creating that sense of intimacy and safety. How about the rest of you?
I feel a really similar way, just in terms of like trying to direct the process, which is like, if there's no imagined recipient, it's just too much. And I can't say like who, or I won't say who specifically each poem is for, but I do often start just as if I'm imagining writing a letter to someone close to me, or even like to another artist or a person I'm in conversation with, and often it will start, pigeons, it'll start with like dear, and that's how I get into the writing process. Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. That's cool. Yeah, I love that sort of mode of address to like an intimate other person as a way of like getting into the process also. And yeah, I think the answer to this question also is very intimate for me. There's two answers that come to mind when I think about this book specifically. One, which I think was more of like an ethical or like political person that I was addressing. There's this like character or collective of the ghost chorus in the book, and that's sort of thinking through these histories of psychiatric survivors and people who have been involved in a lot of lineages of like mad liberation organizing and disability justice organizing in Toronto, who I found in the archives like directly or didn't, but as I was writing, I think it felt like this ghost chorus was taking on its own, or it already was like its own presence and being, and I was sort of writing with or for or alongside that ghost chorus, and thinking through how to do it like responsibly and ethically in a way that do justice to those stories. And then sort of like more on a personal level, or like on the level of process with writing, I think there's like I have to think of like two specific readers, like one who's the person who's just like #1 fan, like this is the best thing I've ever read, like keep going. And I have a specific friend who does that for me, who is also a poet actually, Sana Wani, who's a Kashmiri poet whose work is amazing. She wrote My Grief the Sun. I'm plugging it now, you all should check it out. We do that for each other. But yeah, so that person who kind of allows the like suspension of doubt in order to keep writing and to feel like there is someone in the world for whom this will matter, like outside of me, which I can't do for myself. And then the other person who's like who will like shock me into like fear or anxiety about the idea of like them reading it, and not in like they're my enemy kind of way. Like usually it's a close friend or a comrade. I think in particular like people that I organize with and do other kinds of or relate to in ways that are not sort of centered around poetry. I think of those people who I really trust and admire their way of being in the world and think about what their response would be. And yes, and then the realization that person might read the poem, I think usually like pushes it into a different place where I feel like I can be proud of it or I can be okay like sharing it with that person. Yeah.
I don't think I thought of anyone reading my book, and it's been out since April, and I still don't know if anyone's reading my book. I mean, it's just real. So in a way that gave me a lot of freedom because I didn't think anyone would, so I could do whatever. Unfortunately, my parents did read it, and there's a lot of NSFW stuff in there, so that was uncomfortable for a moment, but try not to think about it. But I guess I was like, just writing for not even myself. I guess I was exploring my values of like who gets to be seen, who gets to be valued, ideas of progress and hopes for degrowth. But yeah, I don't know anyone cares about those things in the same way as I do. But perhaps if someone does reads the book, they will think about those things.
Yeah, that's great. Who you're not writing for. Writing can also be a way of just being in conversation with other thinkers and artists and writers who you really admire. So I'm curious about that too. Like, who do you feel like your work is kind of in conversation with, or who are your idols and influences? Who'd like to start? Jody, how about you?
Okay. I saw the eye contact happening. I was like, should I look away or should I just accept that this is happening? Someone asked me this question actually yesterday, so I have a head start in thinking about it. But this feels very true also today and has since I started writing. But Solmaz Sharif's work has been like very, very influential for me and sort of foundational in my practice of thinking about how language works to bolster or recreate empire and the ways the ways that it functions, language as a site of struggle and contesting those meanings, and then also like the limitations of language or like ethical questions around like beautifying things in language or in poetry that should not be. And yeah, so her work and her thinking and her writing about poetry is like very core for me. Her lineage that she talks about often coming through June Jordan's program, Poetry for the People. And of course, June Jordan's kind of lifelong commitment to an internationalist form of solidarity, to Palestinian liberation at a time when that was like very, very risky, and in ways that there is a piece that came out in the LA Review of Books a few months ago that was being shared around a lot in my circles, talking about her work and in relationship to Audre Lorde's work and Adrienne Rich's work and her peers, kind of in the space of liberatory kind of lyric modes of being, and the way that probably like hurt her career or her vocal commitments to Palestinian liberation. So I think about that too, like the kinds of risks that a poet is responsible for taking in order to kind of manifest like the ethic that is in the poetry, not just in the work itself or in the craft, but then also off the page. So yeah, the two of them for sure. Mercedes Eng, Prison Industrial Complex Explodes. I think it was one of the first collections that I read that really, like what's another word than explode? Really expanded quickly.
You must be a writer.
My conceptions of what you could do, kind of analyzing like state documents and pointing out the contradictions and using juxtaposition to do something that like a persuasive political mode couldn't do. So yeah, I think those are some of my key influences that I'm thinking of right now and that I hope to be in conversation with anyway.
Yeah, Zara, you're really writing about language too, and do you want to chime in there?
Sure, yeah. I think I would say quite a few different poets also, but for this collection, a lot of sort of influences were, there's Urdu feminist poets like Kishwar Nahid and Fehmi Daryaz, whose work I came across. It's in Urdu, but then looking at the English translations and seeing some of the themes and wanting to work with them and in conversation with them. And then also poets like Safia El-Hillo and Fatima Asghar, who are also sort of doing multilingual work, multilingual poets who are trying to work with different language traditions in the English language. And then also Agha Shahid Ali, who was a Kashmiri American poet, and just like extraordinary ghazals that he wrote. And what I loved about his ghazals was that the way he is able to still keep sort of the passion of Urdu and Arabic and Persian poetry in the English lyric, and he's able to translate that in there, and also the imagery that he works with. And so I learned just skill-wise and also just being confident to be able to sort of write that way a lot from his work. And and then also queer poets like Leah Horlick, her collection For Your Own Good, that was something that collection really gave me permission, I think, to put this collection together. And something that she talks about, or her work kind of addresses, is when you're trying to talk about something as within a marginalized community, and you feel already protective of that community, but at the same time you need space to sort of say something that might have happened within the community. And so I think there's her work sort of really opened that door for me. Yeah.
Lovely. I love how there's just like there's kind of worlds of reading, right? And then, it's overlapping circles a little bit. And Jazz, how about you?
Yeah. So this book, in terms of structure and approach, is really influenced by Anne Carson, who I've been really obsessed with in the last couple of years. And I'll specifically say like the way that there's like a couple little chapters that almost act as an introduction before the big verse poem section, or verse novel section. The title from this book, I feel that way too, is inspired by, or is just from a performance by artist Adriana Disman, who performed in Vancouver in 2019, a work called Care Work. And I was writing an art response to their performance and was just extremely taken by it. And the lines, "Do you ever feel like violence and desire are so closely intertwined, you don't know what you want? I feel that way too," are from that work. And I had this letter writing process where I wrote a whole bunch of like imagined letters to Adriana and then like their imagined letters back to me through quotes from their work. And I like let them know about it. It wasn't that weird. And very much have like permission, enthusiastic permission to have their work in conversation with my own. So that's, very literally who I'm in conversation with. And then in terms of my like creative and philosophical or cultural foundation, I'm really impacted by the writing of Edward Said, who's a Palestinian theorist who passed just over 10 years ago, I think. And he wrote Orientalism and Culture and Imperialism, among other things. And it just really, painfully impacted me in terms of realizing how all cultural production is made to cement structures of oppression and empire and white supremacy. And there's just so much, just engaging with pop culture and media and how none of it is innocent, and it's, yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciated that fair people.
Well, when I started this book a long time ago, the person in my head was Sarah DeLeu, who's a BC poet and essayist and academic and does great service for marginalized communities. So her work is really, I think it's the best. It's just the best. But she had a book, her first book of poetry came out over a decade ago, called Geographies of a Lover, and that book really changed my perspective of what I could write, and so I was trying to channel that sexy landscape poetry thing she was doing, and she helped me with this book. She edited Wet, and she told me I needed to be smuttier, so so I owe any smut you see in there to her. So definitely Sarah, and then as far as books in conversation with mine, or vice versa, I have a friend who's Singaporean, and Singapore-born, I'll say, and she wrote a book called, her name's Tanya de Rosario, and her book is called Dinner on Monster Island, and we're buddies, but we did not write them together, but then they both came out in the same season, and they're definitely books that should be read together, because her book is a collection of essays that just tries to make sense of the dystopia that is Singapore, and from her own experience of growing up there. And then mine is just from me as an outsider who's lived in Singapore, but together they tackle issues of migrant worker abuse, models, and idea of thinness in Singapore, yada yada yada. There's lots of similar themes, because that's just what Singapore offers us. So I would recommend reading that book too.
Amazing, yeah. One thing that I really noticed that's a commonality between all your books is that you all are so interested in and careful with working with form and tailoring your form to what you're up to in such intelligent ways, and working in very hybrid ways, where the book's doing all kinds of different things in different sections and whatnot. And Leanne, I saw an interview where you described yourself as an amphibious creature and kind of connected that to your dexterity with forms. And I'm just interested in how, for this particular collection, each of you went about making decisions about form, and how those formal choices came to you or were made, or what kind of, how they enlivened the work.
I'm just going to start talking and hope something will come out. I hate the silence, right? So just thinking about that amphibious. So I'm doing my PhD right now, and I'm exploring this idea of something I'm calling amphibious poetics. And so the idea behind that is a mode of practice where one moves between disciplines, between environments, is responsive, like an environmental indicator, like an amphibian is, they absorb so much of what the environment gives them, which is quite often toxins, and then they can respond and tell us that we're indicating this. Anyway, so I feel like I'm an environmental indicator. I feel like I move between worlds, and I'm trying to navigate land, water, and race, and all these things myself. So I think the way Wet has turned out, I didn't think about it. I just did it. and I do work in different disciplines. So previously I had put music with my previous 3 books, and I just wanted to do something different, and I was trying to use more words this time. That's the real truth of it.
It's a challenge for yourself. Jody, how about you? You're using like DSM entries, glossaries. The researcher comes in as interviewing this person from the past, Velma Demerson. And then there's the form of the impact statement at the end of the book. Like, talk to us about your formal choices.
Whatever I can get. I feel like actually as I write more and more poetry, I'm trying to use less and less words, so we'll see where we cross in the middle. But yeah, so there's technically, oh no, that's not true. There's like a few longer poems in the book, and as I was writing, or as I was drafting it, I was feeling more and more drawn to the form of the long poem in general, sort of as a space that can hold a lot of contradiction, revision, rethinking, like self-correction or self-reflection, in a way that I felt like a single poem or like a shorter poem was starting to feel very like stressful or like a lot of pressure for me. And I noticed I was like trying to cram in all this stuff and getting very heady and like conceptual, and it like wasn't working, and I needed sort of the expansiveness of a long poem to hold it. So the poem Impact Statement is a longer poem. But then, in the process of editing, and I worked with Mercedes Ang on this book, she pointed out that the whole thing felt like a long poem, and that really like unlocked something for me in terms of form and what I felt could go in it. Because at some point in the editing, I was like noticing all these like omissions or things that I wanted to address, but they were sort of more like thematic things. I'd say, the connection between like desires that are criminalized by the state and queerness and institutionalization, like I haven't really brought that together as like coherently as I want to, but that's not really like a way to enter into a poem to be like, how am I gonna like, so then I needed to set myself kind of more like playful, weirdly, like formal challenges. Like there's one poem where I like picked 3 consonants at random, and it's like, every line has to end with a noun that includes all 3 of those sounds. And then it sort of evolved from there, but at some point in the editing, when I'd just been staring at it for so long, I needed to like inject something else for me to work with, to get at those themes in a way that wasn't just about, like persuasion again, or something on that level of headiness. I needed to come down to a different level in me. And then I was a drummer for a few years, formerly, now no longer, but a couple of the pieces also were in conversation with like compositions that people in the group that I was in did. So they kind of all came and accumulated over time as well, and the idea of a long poem helped them all kind of cohere in the end, I think, in my mind,
Yeah, thank you. Chaz, you kind of talked a little bit about your form already, how there's that beginning that has a very different structure, and then we start into the I feel that way too section, which just is a flowing long sequence that one page flows into the next. Do you want to just talk about those sections in your book?
Yeah. So I had initially written the big I feel that way too section, and then the publisher was like, this isn't long enough to be a book, you have to write more. And I was like, okay.
More words.
Yeah, more words. And this is when I was like, okay, I'm reading so much Anne Carson, and this is what she does, is she's a translator from ancient Greek, and she will have these big translations, and then there will be a couple other chapters, and maybe it's like an imagined interview with the original writer, or maybe it's like a philosophical treatise on whatever this concept is. And this seemed just really fun to me. First of all, an efficient way to only write like 15 more pages without needing to like do a whole thing. And it was exciting to me as a way of almost like having an introduction to the book and like inviting people in and helping suggest to people like how to read it, because most of my friends aren't poets or like lit nerds, and I want to try to welcome people who aren't super comfortable in the world of poetry to read the book. So yeah, that seems like an opportunity to me, and also an opportunity to, to take the themes that I noticed I wanted to talk about, or I thought I was talking about, but didn't like actually really show up, and just more obviously bring them in so people knew that I was trying to talk about them.
How would you, Sarah?
Yeah, I guess with this collection, I was exploring the loss of language and speechlessness or silence. And so I needed a form that could hold that. And so initially it was more of a prose project, but it was poetry that allowed for me to kind of hold, it was the right sort of form to hold fragmentation and that sense of like silence. I think the poetic line can do that with space and all of these things. So I was thinking about that a lot, but then even as a project overall, I thought also about water and how it's the water, like it felt like working on this project felt like working with water in the sense that water gets meaning from the shape that it's in. So whether it's like the container, so whether, there's water, but whether it's like a river, it's the shape of the river that gives the river, makes the water a river, or if it's a lake or an ocean, and those are all sort of different bodies of water, and it's their shape that kind of gives them that meaning. And so, glass of water with cold water versus like a hot shower, that you're taking. So these are all different sort of the water. It's the container and the shape and the vessel that gives that substance the meaning. And so with this project, I was thinking about that a lot, like what is the shape that it needs to be in to sort of hold, and what is the hold meaning, and what am I trying to do, and how do I create a form that allows this water to do this thing and have the force that it needs to have. And yeah, that's sort of what I was working with and thinking about while I was working on. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow? Oh, sorry. I have a follow-up question. I'm busting up the order here. Sorry about that. But just as you were talking, Sarah, and you said it's the shape that gives water, the shape of the container that gives water its meaning. And I thought of a line from the first poem that you read today, that all memory is water. So I wondered about the shape of the container of memory also, and the fact that this project started out where you had the idea of like memoir or prose and like a different sort of shape of container. Like, was there between poetry and prose, or what was it about the shape of that container that also was giving meaning to memory in a different way?
Yeah, I think because also it's about, with memory, I think when you experience something traumatic or you're after some sort of violence or rupture, I think there's a sense of like linearity kind of falling apart. And there's something about also with memory, like there's a sense of there isn't like, a story that maybe you were told as a child, and like something that maybe happened 2 days ago, and maybe something, from like your ancestral sort of thing. It just everything that you're carrying kind of all falls apart and kind of there isn't like a hierarchy necessarily of time. And I think that's also sort of how memory starts to work. And that's also, I think, what it feels like that's also why water was a helpful image for me, because in water, things are sort of set adrift. And there's a kind of, like, I think the language of memory to me feels like the language of memory is a language of water. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Is that what you're, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I can kind of feel the wateriness in your work in musicality. Like there's a lot of ways that the music in your work carries the meaning, I think, which is really beautiful. Okay, I have one more question, and it comes back to the theme of our panel. So in ecology, edge effects happen whenever different habitats or communities or beings come in contact with one another, and there's this borderland where interesting things happen. And it can be artistically and psychologically too. So I was just wondering, for you, what were the edges that you were working with that either you found enlivening or generative or maybe difficult, maybe transgressive in some way, or transformative?
Okay, it's my turn. I don't know the answer. Something that was really important to me, I guess it was like my personal edge throughout the process was, okay, so context. The main critique of my book is that the Me Too movement says that it posits that it supports survivors, but actually it's just super triggering to be around all this content all the time. And I'm like, you did a bad job at doing the thing you thought you were doing. Great. So I'm like, okay, how do I write this book and also not have this triggering work? So I just spent a long time reading and watching and engaging with media on the topic of sexual violence, and just really noticing how it impacted me, and trying to find ways to talk about or around violence without actually hurting. So I guess it is it was my emotional edge, and also this literal experience of hedging around a topic and finding the meaning without just reproducing the harm. Yeah.
Yeah, you handled that very delicately. How about, you're working with similar things, Jody, very consciously.
Yes, I was nodding vigorously while trying not to give Mike feedback while
Go.
we were talking. But yeah, I think a lot of, very much, I had similar questions in my mind too. Yeah, just everything you were saying, which I won't repeat, around navigating, talking about violence without reproducing, or the impact of it for yourself and also for readers. It was a big question for me. I read Ordinary Notes by Christina Sharp, in the last season of editing, and that was very helpful, I think, for me in just felt very profound the ways that she was writing about care, different definitions of care as collective care as shared risk, or writing about care while also having it be an analysis of power. Those are a lot of questions that Mercedes deals with in her work too. So it's just really, really instrumental to also have an editor to work through those questions with. And then, so much of the critique of the book is about care without consent, or coercion, or confinement, or state violence and abandonment that masquerades as care, or takes place in the name of care, but actually is about disappearing or erasing or murdering people who the state doesn't want to exist. And so consent was very... Thank you. So consent was also felt like a really big thing that I wanted to navigate, both with the reader, with myself, how am I actually coming to this poem, and am I in the right, but am I in a space where I'm able to handle this with care and myself? And then also with, there's a lot of real people and histories and archives that come in, we're part of the making of this book, and then also thinking how to seek consent in those ways, in some cases with people who are not alive. So what does it mean to seek consent from a ghost or from an ancestor? Can I claim someone as an ancestor who doesn't know me, or who can't answer that question literally in a way that I could ask? So those are all kind of questions, and I think, felt very edgy in the sense of there's no right answer. I can't politically risky for me, ethically risky, but I think, also felt important to wrestle with.
It seems like both of you, one of the ways you were dealing with that also was through that beautiful line that you quote in your book, Jody, where you say, referencing Audre Lorde's essay, poetry is not a luxury, and dreaming otherwise is as essential as food for us to survive. So alongside the critique is always this dreaming otherwise that brings something into being as well. Dan or Sarah?
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, one of the things I was interested in doing was going into sort of scripture and traditional stories, Islamic stories, and kind of approaching them, looking at the Arabic original and translating it and kind of reclaiming it from a feminist sort of perspective. Stories of women in the Quran, stories of, and so just that was I would say it was in some ways transgressive in the sense that a lot of the interpretations that exist in the mainstream can be quite patriarchal. So, but it's like there's the text is there and I have access to it and I can just go into it and I can translate it myself and I can be like, actually, this is what's happening, because we all bring ourselves, who we are as readers, we bring ourselves to the text and that's what we see. So bringing myself to the text and translating it and interpreting it and bringing these stories out and seeing them again in a new way was very liberating and yeah.
Bowls.
Yeah.
Very bowls. Dan?
Yeah, thanks. So in my work, there's been a theme of love and environmental crisis. And so with this book, one of the reasons why it took so long was because I was just trying to make it different, and beyond the more words, I was trying to do something different with how I was finding those intersections of those two things. And so for this book, the thing that was really new for me was the considerations of how I represented the more than human world in the book, and like trying to learn the best way to do that. And I don't think I did that, but it's my first attempt to bring non-human perspectives through my words into the larger narrative, which I think is important and could be explored more. And so I think that was the way I was sort of pushing my boundaries for this book, and the more words.
Interesting. And more ways, yeah. I think that could be said for all of you. Well, thank you so much. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening. Please pick up their books. They're so worth it. And yeah, let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie.
I want to make sure I'm not interrupting any questions. Okay. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you very much, especially to our moderator authors, Jody, Leanne, Zara, Jazz, and Melanie. If you're interested in purchasing the books, as Melanie mentioned, by these featured authors, they are available at the table out there by Monroe's. And there are many more festival events to come this weekend, including one featuring tonight's moderator, Melanie Siebert, at Weymouth Nature Sanctuary. So please refer to your program on our website. Our website also features Q&As with these authors and participating all year, and a place for you to sign up for our newsletter, which is very informative. So please go to victoriafestivalauthors.ca for more info. If you would like to support the festival in any other ways, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and encourage your friends to attend one of our upcoming events. You can also make a tax-deductible donation to Victoria Festival of Authors through our website or VFA's page on the Canada Helps webpage. And the year coming, your donations are instrumental in ensuring the VFA remains an engaging, accessible, and sustainable festival. So before we conclude, I believe there is a raffle. Okay, so this is for the smaller of the prize. So all the smaller only in quantity. All of the authors tonight and their books. Or just the books. You need a van. Okay. The last three numbers are 984. 984. There we go. Okay. We'll just take your word for it, I guess. There's only two. So.
That'd be prize.
This is the big one. Still only books. But a lot more books. The last numbers are 062. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at more events this weekend.